What is going on, everyone? How are you? Good to see you all. Okay, well, I'm heading home from the clinic, and I was thinking about something to share. So I wanted to share a case that we're seeing that made some progress, hasn't completely resolved, but I'm just curious to get your feedback, and just want to share the thought process from a chiropractic and functional movement standpoint of how we look at these things. So this patient came in with a severe, deep hip muscle contracture, and we identified it. I mean, just on palpation, it looks to be her piriformis primarily. Real quick side note: we just pre-recorded. We just recorded, so now it's pre-recorded. If you watch it, we recorded a 30-minute demo inside of our doctor portal, showing all the different training, the clinical stuff, the operations, the procedures, everything, how it works. Staff training, it's all inside there. So I finished that over the weekend, and if you want to check it out, it's at demo.movenowu.com. So you can see a new video up there. It's a 30-minute demo. So if you're curious about how all this stuff works and you want to see if it's something you're interested in checking out, that's why I made the video. So check that out. But anyway, back to this case. So she had this super deep contracture, just deep muscle type of pain and stiffness in her hip. It looks like piriformis primarily. And the thing that's interesting, like she's done everything. She's had this for 2 years. She's done dry needling. She's done acupuncture. She's done, which are different things really. There are different theories behind them both, but she's done that. She's done that with electrical stimulation applied to it as well. She's done a lot of deep tissue massage. She's done chiropractic before. She has done various types of physical therapy, all kinds of stuff, never gone away, 2 years constant, not a second of relief really. And so she comes in to see us, and that's her primary thing that she wants to get fixed. Well, we found a bunch of other stuff going on with her body. She's got a reverse neck curve and thoracic hyperkyphosis and a lot of other dysfunctional movement patterns that all probably tie into the fact that she's has such an overactive piriformis, it seems like, or deep hip stabilizer. And anyway, so we're working on this stuff, and the main conclusion that I came to pretty early on is that her prime movers, so her glute medius and glute max, are super underactive and weak. So you can test that with a muscle strength test and see that it's weak on both sides, just weaker than it should be. Glute max should be super strong when you test it. On most people, it should be pretty strong. You should be able to put a lot of body weight into it, and they should be able to hold that. She could not do that. Her glute medius, very weak muscle in a lot of people, very weak on her. Now, we know that this is innervated lower lumbar spinal nerve roots, so of course you want to make sure that you're clearing out the spine or ruling out any sort of severe nerve compression that might need something more invasive than what we do as chiropractors. But working on those areas too didn't really seem to have a whole lot of effect. So the main conclusion we came to was, okay, how do we teach her how to really activate her glute medius and max and see if that allows those deeper hip muscles that are trying to drive the movement instead of the main prime movers like glute med and max. What if you can get glute med and max working? Could you calm down and cause those other muscles to just finally take a chill pill and relax and not give her so much grief? So that's been working to an extent. It's not 100% feeling better, but that's been helping create some relief, and the first relief she's had in a long time. Now, the whole reason that I'm sharing this is because that pattern is one that we've talked about before, and it's kind of a cool process to think about because this applies to other areas of the body too. It applies with shoulder internal rotation, shoulder flexion, and a lot of stuff in the hip. And so here's the whole clinical thought process that I just want to share with you, is that oftentimes when someone has hip dysfunction, and it can lead to a pain like that, it can lead to a piriformis pain, deep hip pain in the posterior. There's this complex of things that you want to check for that oftentimes happens to occur in this cluster. And the cluster is this: shortened or adaptively shortened hip flexors. Someone's sitting for long periods of time, or they're just overactive in their hip flexor, so it's tight and overactive, or it can be shortened because they're in a seated position for a long period of time, so it adaptively shortens and it's tough to lengthen it. So when that happens, when the muscle in the front of the body, hip flexors, so psoas, iliacus, tightness in the front there, what happens is that's going to now basically cause reciprocal inhibition. So it's going to shut off the opposing joint action muscle, which would be the muscles that cause hip extension. So the hip flexors are overactive, the hip extensor muscles now get reciprocally inhibited. So they're neurologically shut down a lot of times with normal movements and actions. But what happens is your body still wants to extend your leg, like when you walk, and if you ever have other times you need to extend your leg, like in normal activities of daily living. So what happens is it now recruits the secondary muscles, the deeper muscles that are more for stability and very specific movements. Now it takes them and it recruits them for these prime actions. So it takes a muscle like the piriformis muscle, and which piriformis is a external rotator, okay, and a deep stabilizer. It now takes a piriformis muscle and it makes that muscle attempt to do things that glute medius and maximus should be doing, right? So now what happens is that further allows that main driver to go to sleep. A really good analogy that I heard a long time ago was when you're looking at prime movers and like secondary ancillary muscles and reciprocal inhibition, like this whole process, like a good analogy is if there's a big company and let's say there is a CEO, and the CEO is like the glute max in this case, right? The CEO is out sick. And so because he's out sick, you have like 4 interns that together they can cover all the jobs that the CEO is doing. And they're running around like crazy trying to cover what the CEO normally does very effectively himself. Now you have these 4 interns scattering around trying to cover all the jobs, and they're doing it, but they're getting exhausted and they can't do it forever. That's a great analogy for what happens, like in this case, for example, you have all these deep hip stabilizing muscles that try to do things like hip extension and you know, basically act like a fill-in for what glute max and glute med should be doing. And it can do it temporarily, but it can't do it forever. And when it tries to do it long term, things start to break down and become super dysfunctional and painful and causes a whole host of other issues. So anyway, curious as to how all the other doctors out there would address a case like this too. I know in like a simple form, you just think like, man, if you can like loosen up the muscle. So if you do things to, you know, smash the muscle and stretch the muscle and get it to calm down, and maybe that can decrease some pain. Well, she's done all that stuff. She's done all of that and got little to no relief. And now that she's going through a protocol of actually knowing how to activate her glutes and start using those and start even trying to conscientiously think about firing the glutes when she's walking. So like when she extends her leg, actually go into glute activation, like take your fingers periodically and poke and touch your glutes to get them to drive behind you. So those are things that we've taught and told her to do, and then what we're really trying to get her to do on top of that is then get her to start to maintain a normal exercise routine where she does lots of exercises initially or protocols initially to try to initially calm down the piriformis. So things like first globally with a foam roller and then a double lacrosse ball, and not hammer it to death, but do this for a couple of minutes just to get it desensitized and maybe a little bit calmed down. Then get into some just very, very brief stretching, not for very long, but just enough so there's good active mobility in the area. Then get into glute activation, really targeted glute activation with some some corrective exercises, so things to actually get the mind-muscle connection working again. Make sure she's actually doing hip extension, like with glute bridges, and doing glute driving through that exercise instead of lumbar extension, right? Or like attempting to do it, but not being able to get the leg fully extended to put the torso and the leg into a straight neutral position, meaning can they even reach 0 degrees of just neutral hip position, and preferably get into 10 degrees of hip extension, true hip extension. So those are things she does from like an activation standpoint. But then after that, the goal is to then go into functional exercises to reinforce the healthy patterns, things to start building strength. So what's a good exercise to do that? Well, you could do weighted glute bridges. You can put like a kettlebell in front of you or like a plate in front of you and do weighted glute bridges. You can do banded glute bridges. But even better than that, after you've done it supine and you've done glute bridges, is then stand up and do things like a kettlebell deadlift. So a weighted hip hinge, deadlift pattern, come up at the top, really squeeze the glutes at the top. Eventually a more complex move would be like kettlebell swing. So that's how we think about a lot of this stuff, is that to really fix people, the goal is to get them exercising, but of course calm down, reduce pain, make sure you're addressing things from a neurological and structural standpoint, but also from a motor control standpoint, from how is the brain operating as the patient's going through these normal movements on a daily basis, and is this person coherent in or aware in moving and driving movements with the appropriate muscles. Like in this case, are they doing this with the glute, or are they just doing it with like deep stabilizers and the glutes asleep at the wheel? Curious to how you doctors look at this stuff, if there's anything you have to add to this as far as things you found helpful clinically. If you want to see more about all the systems where we discuss a lot of the clinical stuff, a lot of the different functional patterns that you'll see here commonly with like 95% of the human population, and then how we program this and how we motivate patients to do this and stick with it and do their home care. And it works the majority of the time. A lot of patients really get into it. It resonates well with them. If you want to see that, check out the new demo video that we just made. It's demo.movenowyou.com, and you can check out, it's a 30-minute pre-recorded demo. I actually just finished it this weekend. I just show behind the scenes inside of the doctor and staff training portal. So it shows there's 54 different tracks, I believe, bunch of lessons in there, and just really good methodical information to be able to take someone that either knows nothing about functional movement corrective exercise and teach them a really good baseline and all the systems that go along with it, or someone that's pretty well versed. Like there's a lot of doctors that we have that use our program that have done a lot of functional movement training. They've gone to FMS and SFMA and all kinds of extracurricular stuff that they're really into the clinical side, but they just don't know how to apply it. They don't know what systems to put together. They don't know how to simplify it enough to run through with a patient or explain it to a patient even, to get them willing to do it, willing to show up for visits, and willing to pay for it. So hopefully that helps, and I'm curious to get some feedback from all of you, so please share below, and we'll talk to you real soon.